They say the modern world is drowning in debt, but few ever ask where the architecture of that debt was first written. Today, global liabilities exceed $300 trillion. Governments borrow to survive. Corporations borrow to expand. Families borrow just to breathe. It feels normal, but it wasn't always like this. This world of invisible credit, of financial power overshadowing political power, of institutions becoming too big to fail, did not begin with Wall Street, nor with London, nor with the Rothschilds. It began in a city-state barely larger than a modern neighborhood, Florence, 15th century, a place where art was born and where a new weapon of control was engineered in silence, a weapon so powerful it could move armies without raising a sword, topple governments without firing a shot, rearrange the future without touching the present. That weapon was the Medici Bank, and the truth is disturbing. They didn't just fund the Renaissance, they invented the banking system that rules your life today. Letters of credit, shadow influence, political engineering, financial immunity, the blueprint of the global banking system from central banks to corporate oligarchs, to the silent architecture of debt was coded by one family, a family that understood something humanity is still refusing to accept. Power does not belong to those with armies. Power belongs to those who control the money that feeds them. This is the forgotten origin story of the modern world, the birth of the shadow banker archetype, the moment finance detached from morality and became a technology of control. But what if this wasn't a historical accident? What if it was designed? And more importantly, if the Medici blueprint still governs our world today? Where does the cycle end? To understand the Medici Bank, you must first understand the world before it existed. Before banking, Europe in the early 1400s was financially primitive. Gold and silver coins were scarce. Trade was slow. And the church, the most powerful authority of the age, had banned interest. Charging interest usury was considered a sin, a crime against the natural order. Money could be exchanged, but not multiplied. And yet, a merchant couldn't travel with gold across dangerous roads. A government couldn't mobilize an army without immediate payment. A king couldn't rule without borrowing. The world needed liquidity, and it needed it desperately. But morality blocked the path. Enter the Medici. Giovanni de' Medici saw the loophole, a moral crack in the institution that ruled Europe, the church. While priests condemned usury, they also needed accountants, treasurers, money handlers, financial managers who could move money without calling it interest. Giovanni realized something profound. If the church controls morality, but we control the church's money, then who controls whom? This was the moment the fuse was lit. The birth of modern credit. The Medici family created a deceptively simple tool, the letter of credit, a piece of paper worthless by itself but backed by trust in the Medici name. A merchant could deposit money in Florence, receive a coded letter, travel 800 miles, and retrieve the same value in another Medici branch. No gold needed. No risk, no sin, because the Medici didn't charge interest on the loan. They charged a fee for exchanging currencies, a fee hidden inside clever mathematics, a fee the church could never outlaw. This wasn't finance. This was financial engineering. The Medici Bank transformed money from something physical into something conceptual, a promise, a whisper, a shadow, and shadows cannot be taxed, regulated, or morally judged. The real mechanism influenced as the Medici network expanded. So did its power. Kings needed them, popes needed them, merchants needed them, but the Medici needed only one thing: obedience. A quiet transfer of loyalty from crown to banker, from church to financier, from state to shadow power. This was not a business. This was a system. The first proto-central bank, the first multinational corporation, the first private empire. The Medici weren't just servicing Europe, they were reprogramming it. They discovered a truth we still ignore today. When you control debt, you control destiny. But if this was the beginning, what was the pattern that followed? Every empire, from Rome to Washington, follows a financial cycle, a cycle built not by kings, but by the architects of money, and the Medici were the first to perfect it. The 5-stage blueprint of the Medici system, this is the pattern they wrote, the same pattern that echoes across history. Stage 1, scarcity, a world short on liquidity. Trade suffocates, governments panic, people look for salvation. Florence, 1400, exactly this. Stage 2, innovation, a solution emerges, not from governments, but from private financiers, letters of credit, clearing networks, shadow accounting. Today, digital money, blockchain custodians, private credit markets, same mechanism, same. Psychological dependency. Stage 3, influence, the lender becomes the advisor. The advisor becomes the gatekeeper. The gatekeeper becomes the ruler. The Medici financed popes, then they installed popes with money. Today, tech oligarchs lobby governments, banks dictate policy, corporate donors write legislation. Again, same pattern. Different century. Stage 4, expansion and overreach, branches multiply. Loans grow larger. Risk hides beneath prosperity. The Medici became too big to fail before the term existed. Their collapse would collapse Florence. Their bankruptcy would bring down kingdoms. So governments protected them, shielded them, bowed to them. Sound familiar? Modern banking works the same way. If the institution becomes large enough, failure becomes politically unacceptable. The system becomes a hostage, a beautifully designed trap. Stage 5, inevitable collapse, not because the system is broken, but because it works exactly as designed. Prosperity creates greed. Greed creates risk. Risk creates collapse. Collapse concentrates power even further. The Medici fell, but their blueprint survived. Spain followed it. Britain followed it. The US Federal Reserve still follows it. The pattern is older than nations, older than ideologies, and older than the illusion of financial stability. Which brings us to the present. Where are we today in this cycle? The uncomfortable answer: we are not at stage 1, not at stage 2, not even at stage 4. We are at stage 5. A world drowning in leverage, governments borrowing from future generations, central banks using money printing as morphine, tech oligarchs exerting Medici-level influence on global politics. Every indicator points to the same conclusion. The sequence is locked in, the pattern is repeating, and the outcome is unavoidable. But the real question is, what comes after a global Medici-scale collapse? The Medici Bank didn't just shape history. It created the template for the modern world. A world where finance rules politics, where debt replaces democracy, where money moves faster than morality, where influence is bought, not earned. But the deeper truth is this: we are living inside the same machine, the same illusion, the same architecture of debt. The players have different names, different faces, different technologies, but the mechanism remains unchanged. The Medici cycle always ends the same way, with collapse, not because the system fails, but because its success becomes unsustainable. When too much power concentrates into few hands, the system resets. And today, power has concentrated at a level unseen since Renaissance Florence. Central banks, tech giants, multinational banks, debt-fueled governments. The stage is set. The wheel is turning. The pattern is repeating. So the final question is not, will it happen? The real question is, when it happens, will you recognize it in time? Because history doesn't repeat perfectly, but it rhymes. And right now, the rhyme is getting louder. Thank you for watching the entire documentary. If you found this investigation valuable, share it with someone who needs to understand the hidden architecture behind our financial world. And if you want more deep dive documentaries like this one, stories where the past exposes the future, subscribe to Shadow Financial Historia and join us for the next chapter of global power, hidden influence, and the untold truths shaping tomorrow.